Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Commander video. As always, if you appreciate these, please subscribe. I enjoy having you here along for the ride. We're going to be talking about my picks for the 10 Commander options that have aged well. I'm going to have a cutoff point here of around 2017, so anything after 5 years ago, I'm still going to consider that a relatively new option. And before I get into it, a bit of criteria here. It's not just about a Commander option that sees the most play, but rather more about a Commander being irreplaceable and having something unique about it. Maybe it's still considered the best Commander option in that specific strategy, which is why people will still play with it. And also that there are multiple ways in which a Commander can age. Just because I think a Commander here has aged well, that could just mean that it aged well in certain aspects. Other aspects it could age poorly. But of course we're here because the good outweighs the bad. And number 10 is Kalia of the Vast. I think this is a great example of what I was just talking about, because you can make the argument that she's aged really well. You could also make the argument that she has aged kinda poorly. And I believe that when I made a video about commanders that have aged poorly, I did mention Kalia of the Vast, and that is really because going back 11 years now, Kalia was at least a top 3 commander. Between this, Gave Guru of Spores, Animar, it wasn't a super competitive arena. With a lot of variety, you had other commander options, of course, from older sets, but the ones from the first precons made the most sense, since they were designed with the format in mind. Why I also think Kalia of the Vast has aged really well is because it is one of the few commander options that will synergize with 3 different creature types all at the same time, making it a really cool trio tribal commander that you don't really see that often. I know they've tried to do the same thing with Krakens, Leviathans, Octopuses, but this is a lot cooler and people have enjoyed playing Kalia for a long time. There's always going to be an angel that's really powerful, there's always going to be a demon or a dragon that comes out within these colors that's going to be incredibly dominant, so always having a commander that can cheat one of them into play, that ain't going away anytime soon. Number 9, we have Sliver Overlord. This has aged really well considering it's almost 20 years old, but we're talking about tribal again. You're going to see this as a bit of a theme. Commanders that age really well, they're often going to synergize with a specific strategy, and tribal focused decks are a very specific strategy. In my opinion, Sliver Overlord is still the best commander option if you're looking to play the specific Sliver tribal deck. I know people are crazy about the cascade that you get off of the first Sliver, but that's more about it being a competitive commander card, and the decks that you want to go off and win really quickly with the first Sliver, you're probably not going to be playing too many Slivers, if any at all. And the fact that Slivers tend to be pretty powerful, the last time we got them is going back to the first Modern Horizons set. So if they're too powerful for standard, if Wizards is afraid that they're going to dominate, it means that we may go even longer without an even better Sliver commander option. But what the Sliver Overlord does is perfect for commander. You get to tutor Slivers for just 3 mana on an activated ability. You can do it multiple times in a turn, and oh yeah, you have an ability for another 3 mana where you can gain control of target Sliver. There are even combos around stealing all of your opponent's creatures. Slivers remain one of the most popular but at the same time infamous tribes, so they're always going to be relevant. You're always going to hear about them whenever anyone talks about tribes. But we have number 8, a commander option that I think has aged even better, and this has a lot to do with the eminence that you get off of the Dragon. Making all of your dragons 1 less just by playing this as your commander is ridiculous. But even better, if you are able to get the Dragon out there, whenever 1 or more dragons you control attack, you draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. It makes them cheaper, and then it lets you cheat into play other dragons. This is without a doubt the best dragon tribal commander. This is exactly what we mean by aging well, where it's not going to be overtaken as the best dragon commander. Dragons are probably even more popular than Slivers, and the fact that we only have so many of these commander options with Eminence, or any commander option that has functionality in the command zone, means that you will have an advantage over pretty much every other commander that needs to be on the field in order to offer you some kind of benefit. And then number 7, we have Kozilek, the Great Distortion. Now granted, you could choose other commander options if your focus is for colorless, but I don't think they're quite as good as Kozilek, the Great Distortion. People may be distracted by the power that you get off of things like Annihilator, but the reason why I think Kozilek makes the best colorless commander option is because you're able to refill your hand in the mid to late game. Especially when your commander is this expensive and your focus is ramp, you're going to be playing a lot of mana rocks, which will leave your hand empty to the point where you get to play Kozilek. You fill it back up to 7, which is crazy. Menace, so you have commander damage already as an option, you didn't even need to worry, and you can discard a card with converted mana cost X to counter target spell with converted mana cost X. No other commander lets you do that, meaning this is always a threat to shut down the game. You could say that any of the legendary Eldrazi's have aged well, but I think because of Kozilek's unique ability to make a great colorless control commander, it really sets it apart from the rest. It really makes it more than just a good card to throw in the 99, it makes it a formidable commander, which wasn't a very easy thing to think of without Annihilator on an Eldrazi. And then number 6, we have Braggo King Eternal. People are still playing Braggo decks because Blink has never stopped being great, and Braggo is still one of the best Blink commanders. I know there are other options. You have Rune of the Hidden Realm, you have a Minato. I think those are good ones. A Minato's a little bit newer, just after the cutoff for what I was willing to include, but what Braggo really offers is a way to blink more than just your creatures, getting second uses out of ETBs of non-land permanents that enter, as well as being able to take advantage of mana rocks, because when you would blink your mana rock, after it's tapped, of course it comes back into play untapped, so that during your second main phase after you've dealt combat damage, you have even more mana to work with and you can keep going. The caveat, of course, here is that you need to be able to deal combat damage, otherwise your deck is useless, but he is a 2/4 with flying, so that's never been a major concern. You should always have at least one opponent that you can deal damage to, but I think because Blink hasn't really gotten that much better after Braggo is the main reason why I believe he's aged really well. Again, all of these commanders, you could say they've aged poorly in some aspect, and I would say this is close to Kalia in the way that he's aged poorly. Having to attack or having to deal combat damage in order to have any sort of usefulness is a bit of a drawback, but the payoff is worth it. It's like with Kalia, the payoff is worth it, where you get to cheat something into play. The payoff here, if you have an established board presence, blinking all of those creatures, having them come back into play, it's gonna set you so far ahead of your opponents and make it very difficult for them to come back. And then number 5, we have a very unique commander, and this has been a very popular one in Gruul colors, Wart the Raid Mother. We're not really doing anything super crazy when we're going out of the typical Spellslinger colors, but red and green are not Spellslinger colors, and Wart the Raid Mother remains one of the only off-color options to really abuse and take advantage of instants and sorceries well. A ton of green instants and sorceries allow you to ramp up aggressively, so if you use Conspire to copy them, you're going to get even more lands, which helps to enable the red part of the strategy where you're going to be copying massive X-costed burn spells, which is something you could do in typical Spellslinger colors like red and blue, but again, it's the green part of this strategy that is so unusual that really works well. Imagine if you had the aggressive ramp in typical Spellslinger colors, then you would probably have an even better deck, but that's what you have here without the blue part. It is balanced in the sense that you have to pay 6 mana to get her out there, but once you do and you start copying your ramp spells, it's going to be easier and easier to replay her. And we have no other really good Conspire commander option. This is such an old keyword, but it's incredibly powerful. And then number 4, we have Tesseract the Golden Fang. The ability to delve has been brought back in newer sets, so it's not a completely abandoned ability or keyword, but there still isn't a commander option that can abuse it quite like Tesseract. And when you're playing a control deck in Commander, you want to be able to manipulate what cards you're able to get to, and Tesseract has done that for a long time really well, better than most. You pay 4 mana to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, then return a non-land card of an opponent's choice from your graveyard to your hand. This works really well with the delve because in order to play Tesseract, you can actually get rid of the cards in your graveyard you don't want your opponents to give you back, and in control colors, if you have a ton of counter spells, you have a lot of removal, it's going to be very difficult for your opponents to have to constantly fight back against you replenishing your hand. If you're able to get the same spells back, you're able to maintain card advantage, you're able to maintain a board presence, and that is fundamentally what makes a good commander, where you can play them early, mid to late game, doesn't matter, you're gonna crush them. And then number 3, we have Nekosar the Mindraiser. From 2013, you have great commander options like Derevi, you have Oloro. They had their day. I don't think those two have aged as well as Nekosar the Mindraiser, because Nekosar continues to be one of the only good commanders if you want to play Wheel of Fortune cards, if you want to play Windfall cards and hurt your opponents for each card they draw. We have commander options like Niv Mizzet, where you can ping them for each card you draw, but it doesn't quite have the same impact as being able to build a deck around this strategy. These 3 colors work in tandem brilliantly, meaning it's not just about being able to force card draw, but you're also forcing discard. So you're going to be playing your Liliana Caresses, you're going to be playing Megrim, and you're going to play red so you have amazing burn synergies to go along with it. The combination here of Howling Mine and Underworld Dreams is still something that you don't see elsewhere. It's still the reason why you're going to see a unique approach to building this deck. Number 2, we have Zur the Enchanter. an even older commander option, one of the oldest in this video. But similar to why I think Braggo has aged well, similar to why I think Kalia has aged well, you get a payoff here whenever he attacks. You get to cheat into play an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less, which just leaves you with a ton of possibilities. If you want to play Voltron with auras, that's the initial strategy that comes to mind, and it's not too difficult to build that in an effective way. But over the years, I've loved how resilient this commander option has been because of the different types of strategies that take advantage of lower costed enchantments. One that comes to mind is the cycling strategy, because within the cycling strategy, you had a ton of important enchantments like Astral Slide that you needed to get to in order for that deck to really work, which is why I think it's still one of the best commanders to age well, is that it offers you some kind of cheat into play, searchability that can assist any kind of strategy no matter what you want to play with enchantments. So if you're playing Pillow Fort, you could search up a Ghostly Prison or a Propaganda. If you need card draw, you could search up a Rhystic Study. If you need protection, you can search up a Diplomatic Immunity. And if you need more power and toughness, you can search up an Ethereal Armor. Not to mention, out of all of these commanders, I think Xur makes the best competitive EDH1, allowing you to search up for even more competitive cards like Necropotence. Just different ways that you can apply this commander depending on your strategy, and in these 3 colors, it gives you a ton to choose from. Before we go on to the number 1 commander that is aged the best, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Meren of Clan Neltoth has aged really well, but if there is a downside that kept her off of this list, it's that graveyard strategies are a dime a dozen. They're everywhere, and Meren doesn't really do anything to set herself apart, similar to why Carador Ghost Chieftain was a great commander, but only being able to do this once a turn, it's still great. At 4 mana, great costed commander, but not quite an irreplaceable commander option if you're looking for a graveyard strategy in these colors. Then we have Edgar Markov from Commander 2017, the great commander option. Like with the Dragon, Eminence is dominant, and this Eminence ability is ridiculous. You get an additional vampire creature token for every time you cast another vampire. Outside of that though, the payoff is purely combat, and unlike with the Dragon, I think you do at this point have plenty of other vampire commander options that do have their own pros and cons that weigh fairly evenly against Edgar Markov. And then we have a personal favorite commander option of mine, Prosh Skyraider of Care. Commander 2013 is a great commander product. It gave us Nekosar, it gave us Derevi, it gave us Aloro, but even if I believe personally that Prosh has aged incredibly well, we have a ton of other commander options that do something similar at this point. We have Korvold, Feycursed King, and we even have a newer one in Zayator the Incinerator. So all these Jund colored dragon commanders, we're getting a bit oversaturated, which means that if you're looking to play a dominant commander in these colors, you could still go with Prosh, but it's not a necessity anymore. So number 1, you shouldn't be surprised at all to see or hear Atraxa Praetor's voice. I don't know what it is, but 6 years later, we're still seeing Atraxa as a top 3 most built around commander, and all she does is just allow you to proliferate. You have great keywords, which will make her more appealing. She's a 4-color commander, one of the only ones, which does help her to stand apart from the other options here. But I guess it's because there's a lot of room to imagine with Proliferate what you can do. You don't have to go with +1/+1 counters. You can go with -1/-1 counters on your opponent's creatures. You can go with loyalty counters. You can go with any kind of counter that exists. As long as it's on a permanent or a player, you can affect it. And because you have even more colors to choose from compared to the average commander, it means you should be able to build a fundamentally strong commander deck where you're able to effectively ramp up and draw cards. You may think she's overplayed at this point, but she is the complete package. So let me know what you think about these 10 picks here for the commanders that have aged well. As always, subscribe if you have not. I will see you all next time.